By the time Mara Ellis realized she was pregnant, she had already spent 3 years believing love could survive inside a family that measured people by money, reputation, and last names. Mara worked as an event coordinator at Hawthorne Estate, a luxury vineyard and wedding venue outside Charleston, South Carolina. She came from a modest family. Her mother cleaned offices at night, and her father repaired fishing boats until arthritis forced him to stop. Mara had worked hard to build a future for herself, and she believed she had finally found love when she met Elliot Hawthorne, the youngest son of the family that owned the estate. Elliot treated Mara differently from everyone else. He noticed when she stayed late, brought her coffee during long wedding weekends, and listened when she talked about wanting to build a career of her own. Their friendship became a secret relationship. Elliot told Mara he loved her, but he insisted they keep everything quiet until his family was ready to accept them. Mara believed him. Then one morning, a pregnancy test changed everything. Elliot stared at the positive result before reaching for Mara's hand and telling her they would figure it out together. When she asked about his family, he promised they would be angry at first, but eventually they would understand. That promise lasted less than a week. Elliot's older sister, Vivian, discovered the pregnancy. Since their mother had died years earlier, Vivian had become obsessed with protecting the Hawthorne family image. She reminded Elliot that their father was negotiating a massive business partnership with the wealthy Mercer family. Their daughter Claire had already been seen publicly with Elliot, and everyone expected the two families to become connected through both business and marriage. Vivian warned Elliot that a scandal involving an employee could destroy the deal. Elliot insisted Mara was not just an employee. Vivian told him that, to the rest of the world, that was exactly what she was. A few nights later, Elliot's father, Richard Hawthorne, called everyone into the family dining room. Mara stood near the fireplace while Elliot sat across from her. Richard asked whether Mara was pregnant and whether Elliot was responsible. Mara answered confidently that he was. Then Richard turned toward his son. Mara looked at Elliot, expecting him to keep his promise. Instead, Elliot lowered his eyes and said, "I don't know if the baby is mine." Mara felt something inside her collapse. She reminded Elliot of their relationship, the nights they had spent together, and the moment she showed him the pregnancy test. Elliot could barely look at her. Vivian said none of it proved paternity. Richard told Mara that if Elliot denied responsibility, the matter would become a legal issue. Then he fired her. Mara looked at Elliot one last time and whispered, "You promised me." Elliot could only say he was sorry. Mara returned to her parents' small coastal town in North Carolina with 2 suitcases, no job, and a pregnancy she could no longer hide. Her parents were shocked, but they never abandoned her. Her father hugged her before she could finish explaining, and her mother cried because she knew her daughter had been betrayed. Unfortunately, the rest of the town was less forgiving. People whispered about Mara in grocery stores and church. They called her foolish for believing a wealthy man would marry her. Eventually, Mara stopped caring what they said. Her biggest concern became her unborn child. At 28 weeks, doctors discovered that Mara's baby had a congenital heart defect. She learned she was having a girl, but the joy disappeared when doctors warned that the baby might require surgery soon after birth. Mara called Elliot. She told him their daughter was sick and begged him to be there. Elliot offered to send money. Mara told him she did not want his money. She wanted her child's father. Elliot said his family was dealing with too much and ended the call. A month later, Mara gave birth prematurely to a baby girl named Sophie. Sophie weighed barely 4 pounds and spent 6 weeks in intensive care. Mara slept beside her incubator while her parents used most of their savings helping with expenses. Mara sold her car and nearly everything valuable she owned. One night, while holding Sophie in her parents' kitchen, Mara whispered, "I don't know how I'm going to do this." Then she looked into her daughter's eyes and added, "But I'm going to." That promise changed Mara's life. Because Sophie needed frequent medical appointments, Mara took a flexible job answering phones at a small marine insurance office. She quickly noticed the company was losing clients because storm claims were being handled badly. Mara created a simple tracking system that dramatically improved processing times. Her boss promoted her. She began studying at night, taking courses in risk management, finance, and business analytics. What started as a survival job became a career. Years passed. Mara moved from receptionist to claims analyst, then regional catastrophe specialist. Sophie grew stronger. The fragile baby who once struggled to breathe became a fearless little girl who loved swimming and drawing whales. Mara earned a master's degree and eventually became vice president of coastal risk operations for one of the largest insurance companies in the country. She bought her parents a new house and created a comfortable life for Sophie. After years of humiliation and struggle, Mara finally felt free. That was when she met Adrian Cole, an architect who specialized in hurricane resistant housing. He was calm, patient, and never pressured her. When he met Sophie, he did not try to impress her. He simply asked Sophie to teach him how to draw a whale. Sophie liked him immediately. Mara took longer to trust him, but Adrian never rushed her. 9 years after Mara was thrown out of Hawthorne Estate, a Category 4 hurricane struck the South Carolina coast. By then, the Hawthorns had expanded into hotels, luxury resorts, and coastal properties with the Mercer family. Elliot had married Claire Mercer, exactly as Vivian had wanted, but the hurricane destroyed several of their developments, and the Hawthorns filed a massive insurance claim. The executive assigned to oversee the investigation was Mara. When Mara walked into the damaged resort, Vivian nearly dropped the folder in her hand. Richard looked stunned. Elliot stared at Mara as if he had seen a ghost. Mara calmly placed her tablet on the table and introduced herself professionally. The woman they once fired and dismissed was now the person with the power to determine whether their company received tens of millions of dollars. The investigation uncovered serious construction problems. The Hawthorns had ignored engineering warnings and approved cheaper drainage systems. Mara could have interpreted the findings in the harshest possible way and financially destroyed the family. Instead, she did her job honestly. The company covered legitimate storm damage but reduced the payout because of negligence. The Hawthorns survived, but they lost millions. Later, Richard asked Mara why she had not destroyed them after everything they had done to her. Mara looked at him calmly and said, "Because what you did to me doesn't get to decide who I become." That was the moment Richard finally understood the kind of woman they had thrown away. A few months later, Elliot called Mara. He told her his marriage to Claire had ended. They had spent years trying to have children, but doctors eventually discovered Elliot had a genetic condition that made it almost impossible for him to father another child. Then, Elliot said the words Mara had been waiting 9 years to hear: "I want to meet Sophie." Mara immediately understood the timing. She asked why he had suddenly remembered his daughter after all these years. Elliot insisted that he had regretted everything for a long time. Mara reminded him that regret had never caused him to call, visit, or search. Still, for Sophie's sake, Mara eventually agreed to let them meet. She told Sophie the truth carefully. Sophie asked whether Elliot had known about her. Mara said yes. Sophie asked why he never came. Mara answered, "He made a terrible decision." Their first meeting lasted 20 minutes. Elliot cried afterward in his car. The meetings gradually became longer. Sophie eventually allowed him to take her for ice cream, and slowly, a relationship began forming. Mara remained cautious. Adrian never interfered. When Mara asked why, Adrian told her, "Sophie doesn't have to lose her father for me to love both of you." Then Elliot asked Mara to dinner. She agreed because there was one question she needed answered. They met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the water. Elliot apologized again and told Mara he knew he had no right to ask for her back. Mara told him she wanted one thing instead: the truth. She looked directly into his eyes and asked, "If your marriage had worked, if Claire had given you 2 or 3 children, and your life had gone exactly the way your family planned, would you ever have come looking for Sophie and me?" Elliot went silent. Mara waited. Finally, With tears in his eyes, he whispered, "Probably not." The answer hurt, but it also set Mara free. She told him, "So you didn't come back because you suddenly realized we were the love of your life. You came back because the life you chose fell apart." Elliot admitted that at first she was right. Learning he might never have another child made him remember Sophie. But he said that over time, his regret changed. He began realizing not only what he had lost, but what Sophie had lost because of him. He had missed her first words, her surgery, birthdays, school events, and 9 years of her life. Mara told him those years could never be returned. Elliot agreed. Then he asked if she could ever forgive him. Mara surprised him by saying, "I already have." Elliot stared at her. Mara explained that forgiveness did not mean getting back together. She was forgiving him because she refused to let his worst decision control the rest of her life. Sophie deserved the chance to know her father, but Elliot would have to earn that relationship by showing up consistently and honestly. For the first time, Elliot accepted that loving Sophie did not mean getting Mara back. 6 months later, Mara received the biggest opportunity of her career. Her company wanted her to lead a new international climate risk division in Europe. Mara told Adrian first. Without hesitation, he told her she should take it. When Mara asked what that meant for them, Adrian smiled and said his work could move too. Later, Adrian took Mara and Sophie to the marina, where Mara's father once repaired boats. He took Mara's hand and told her, "I don't want to rescue you. You never needed rescuing. I just want to build something with you." Then he proposed. Sophie immediately shouted, "Say yes!" Mara laughed through her tears and did. Elliot attended the wedding. He was no longer Mara's lost love or the villain of her life. He was simply Sophie's father, slowly becoming the man he should have been years ago. Before the ceremony, Elliot thanked Adrian for being there when he was not. Adrian told him, "I wasn't replacing you. I was just loving the people in front of me." Richard also approached Mara and apologized for judging her because of where she came from. He admitted that he had cared more about protecting a business deal than protecting his granddaughter. Mara told him that whether he became part of Sophie's life was now Sophie's decision. Richard accepted that. When Mara finally stood beside Adrian, she looked across the room at Sophie, her parents, Elliot, and everyone who had become part of the strange journey that began with her greatest humiliation. Years earlier, Mara had believed losing Elliot meant losing her future. She had been wrong. Her future had started the moment she stopped waiting for someone else to choose her. Mara took Adrian's hands and said, "For a long time, I thought strength meant surviving what people did to me. Then I learned strength also means deciding what happens next." She smiled. "I choose you." Mara had survived betrayal. She had endured humiliation. She had rebuilt everything from nothing. She had watched the tables turn without becoming cruel. And when the time finally came to choose between the man who regretted losing her and the man who had loved the woman she became, Mara chose the future instead of the past. Elliot received forgiveness. Sophie received her father. Adrian received Mara's love. And Mara finally received the one thing no one had ever allowed her to have when the story began: the right to choose her own life.